One of my favorite things on this planet, one that makes me happier than anything else, is when YouTube recommends me something completely random, just out of the blue. And then all of a sudden, I'm taken down this rabbit hole of a whole new hobby, a whole new world, a whole new topic of something that I never even knew existed before. That does come to the chagrin of my wife, because 9 times out of 10, once I discover something, find a rabbit hole, I get excited about it, and then I run to her to explain it to her. She has to hear hours and hours and hours of lore about something she doesn't care about. Rinse and repeat. Just out of the blue. I've never watched anything like this on YouTube. Just randomly, one day, I had a recommendation from Watch Revival. I think it's Wristwatch Revival. I will link his channel in the description. Basically, what he does is he takes old watches that need a tune-up or some sort of restoration to them, and he takes them apart, fixes them, and makes videos about it. I saw that pop up on my recommended thing on YouTube, and I was like, what the heck could this even be about? And then months later, I've run out of videos to watch. I've watched all of his videos. Something about it is just incredibly fascinating with watches. And again, it's just one of those things. It's just a rabbit hole that YouTube has decided to send me down. And so I did the most reasonable thing that I could think of when getting into a new hobby. I went and bought something to do with that hobby. And this is what I purchased. Any YouTube channel that talks about watches, they're normally going to be about your expensive watches, the Grand Seikos, the Rolexes, the Omegas, that sort of garbage. Now, this is a quote-unquote vintage watch. I got it on eBay, and I paid a solid $40 for this watch. I actually went back and tried to find the listing in my eBay history or whatever. I couldn't find it, so I don't know exactly what happened there, but I promise it was like $43 after shipping. Now, the listing didn't really say exactly what year this came from, so I had to do a little bit of digging. I couldn't find the exact model, make, or anything like that. This is just from the 1960s, from what I can tell. And that's what the listing said as well. It's just from the 1960s, and so it is vintage. And I guess it depends on the person, whether or not you consider something from the 60s to be vintage or not. It was cheap. I bought it. I'm going to call it vintage. I'm going to talk it up and make it sound like it's the best thing ever. That's just what you're going to have to deal with. So there's not a lot documented on sovereign watches. The best I could tell is it was a more affordable line of watches introduced from a watch company called Benrus. They're made in the United States. And so they made this line, Sovereign, to appeal to a more casual market. So I guess you can think of, you've got Grand Seiko at the very top, right? That's like their top dollar, super expensive, super nice watches. But then you have Seiko, which is more consumer friendly, more average consumer oriented watch. And I guess that's kind of what this was. This was, Benrus's Seiko watch, if you will. And so why did I buy it? Well, I have a really bad habit of watching things or reading things, getting interested in a topic, and then wanting to do that myself. And so I was watching all of these watch repair videos, all of these vintage restorations, bringing these watches back to life. And I thought, wow, doesn't that look like a fun project? I'm going to do that myself. Now, obviously, I wasn't going to go and buy something that was crazy expensive. And so I bought a $40 vintage Sovereign watch. So let's talk about the watch in a little more detail before I get into the rest of that story. So what we're working with here is a genuine vintage Sovereign watch. And you can see their little insignia there. Nice numbers. Look, all right, I don't know much about watches. I don't know the terminology. I don't know anything like that. I'm not a watch professional. Okay, you clicked on this video. If I fooled you somehow, I apologize. That was not my intention, but here we are. You'll notice down here that it says shock absorber and 17 jewels. Now we're talking. I'll get into that more in just a minute. So let's take a look at the back side here. You can see there's some advertisements here on the back. Waterproof, shock absorbing, anti-magnetic, all the things you really want in a good wristwatch. It's funny when you look at these old watches that say waterproof, that would not be allowed to say that anymore because They're not waterproof. They're more water resistant than anything. And the way that that works, from my understanding, is they would put a gasket underneath the back plate, and I think there's a gasket on the inside of the crown. And so basically, there's a few stoppages. If you dunk it in water for a little bit, it's going to keep water from getting to the internals of the watch. And then the shock absorbing part, there are little springs and little safe measures in here. So if I were to drop this watch, those will absorb the shock. And so all the pieces are going to continue working. What is this lovely sheen around the body, you are asking? Well, my friends, that is nothing but the best, the greatest, chrome-plated steel. Please do not let your jaws hit the floor because we're not done yet. This watch band, genuine leather. Bam! We're talking the real McCoy. This is real cowhide, baby. I'm pretty sure this is just a replacement watch band that you can buy, like kind of wholesale. I'm sure it's got leather. I'm sure it's leather of some sort, but it looks nice. It matches. It goes well with the chrome-plated steel and the other colors that are found on the watch. The ad on eBay said it's selling as is. And when I see that, I just assume, okay, it's not been tested. It probably doesn't work. It's an old watch. It's not exactly anything crazy to write home about. Again, Sovereign, not the best brand. But, it's $40-some. And I think this watch repair hobby, I just want to get in there. I want to noodle around with the internals and whatnot. And $40, it's a vintage watch. If I get it working, how cool of a story would that be? I could say I bought this vintage watch from the 60s and then took it apart and got it working again, brought life to it. Or, on the flip side of that, if I got it and broke it, well, I'm only out $40 and I got to enjoy a hobby for like a day. I bought it. I ordered it, and then, 3 or 4 days, it showed up at the house, and I was super excited. I even went to Harbor Freight. If you don't know what Harbor Freight is, it is like a cheaper place to buy tools. They have a wide array of tools. They're cheaper. Typically, they're not like the best quality. They're not going to be as good as something that, like Snap-on or something like that. But for little one-off jobs or something that you're not too serious about, like, it serves its purpose. So I went to Harbor Freight of all places, and they had watch tools. They had a case back remover that had different adapters for different types of backs. I bought some cleaning brushes, some tweezers, a little magnifying glass stand thing that has little pincher arms so it can hold it like this. And then you put a magnifying glass over it, and it makes everything much larger. And again, I expected it's not going to work. It's sold as is. It's just it's an old watch from somebody on eBay. I'm going to get it. I'm going to take it apart. I'm probably going to break it. And then that'll scratch that itch. I won't dabble in this hobby anymore. So it shows up, and to be honest, the pictures didn't really do it justice. Because I'm not a watch expert. I wouldn't even call myself a watch enthusiast. Most of the time I wear an Apple Watch. Is it me, or is this just like, it's just a nice looking piece? Even the rougher parts, talking about the condition, this watch has been around longer than most of the people that are going to watch this video. And so looking at it, yeah, it's got some wear and tear on that chrome plated steel there. But, the back of it's quite nice. Really the wear and tear on it is not that bad. And I think it actually adds more to the character of the watch than it being just, slick and shiny. And then the piece on the front, it's got some scratch. I can't really show it, but it's got some scratches on it. But really, for a watch that's been around for as long as this one has, it's in pretty fantastic shape. So I get it out of its box. I'm super excited, right? And I've got my little tools, and I've got them set to the side. And I was like, okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it, I'm going to pop the back off, and I'm going to go to town. So I popped the back off, and that is where I discovered what 17 jewels means. So on the inside of this, on pivot points, there are jewel bearings. A lot of times they're synthetic ruby or synthetic sapphire. They're chemically the same as like a real ruby or a real sapphire, but basically any point that there's like metal on metal contact, you wouldn't want that in a wristwatch because it's going to be doing repetitive move. I mean, you wouldn't want it in general, but it's going to be doing repetitive movements over and over and over and over again, and those parts can wear down rather quickly. And it's not going to last as long. So what they do is they make those bearings out of jewels. The jewels are very hard, they're very slick. They don't wear down near as quickly. That's where I figured out what 17 joules means. And if nothing else, you can come out of this video and tell somebody what the joules in a watch mean. And it could be wrong. You know, you may want to do some of your own research before you tell people that. But hey, anyway, I popped the back off. Beautiful internals. I mean, they look so freaking cool. And I was going to pop it off for this video, but I could not find my tool for it, and I didn't want to scratch it, so I didn't bother with it. You may be thinking, why did I put the back on? I must have broken it. I must have done something. So I take the back off. I see the internals. I'm foaming at the mouth. I'm excited. I'm like, yeah, I'm really going to tear into this baby. And then as I went to unscrew something, it hit me. I said to myself, check if the hands move, dumbass. And so I flipped it over and I was like, okay, yeah, good call, good call. So I pop the little crown out here and I give it a little spin and hey, look, the hands move. That doesn't mean much. You know, that's not a guarantee that everything's peachy on the inside there. But, you know, it's got some movement. That's cool. That works. So I clipped it back. I said, all right, let's get into it. And then I had another thought. I said, hey, just wind it up. Let's just see. Let's just wind it up. I never had a hand wound watch before. This was all new to me. You know, I'm used to Timex. I'm used to the batteries. I'm used to Indiglo. Like, where's the Indiglo on this thing? Back of the, I mean, it's like buck ass naked on the back, gears exposed, everything's out there. And I was holding it like this. I said, all right, I'm gonna give it a turn. I turned it and it didn't do anything. And I said, okay, totally fine. Maybe the mainspring is out. That gives me some insight to that. And then my wife said, how much did you wind it? And I said, I turned it, you know, half a turn. How much more do you need to wind it? And she said, give it a good wind. And so, you know, I took it, again, watch is buck ass naked. So I give it a good wind here and slap me silly. Look at it. She's running. And I'll say it, she's running well. So quickly, I snapped the back on. I was like, okay, this thing is working. I need to not expose the internals and mess it up. So I give it a good wind. You know, I didn't know how much to wind it up. I still don't know how much to wind it up, really. And the seconds are ticking by. And I was ecstatic. I said, I've got a vintage watch that I fully expected to be crap. It has shown up and it is working. It actually works. And I can tell all of my friends that I fixed it, even though I didn't do anything. Watch enthusiasts and people that have worked on watches and stuff know that just because it's ticking doesn't really mean anything. You know, it means the internals are not locked up. You know, they're operating as they should in there. They're turning and stuff, but doesn't mean it's keeping good time. And watches over time, as they age and the springs kind of wear out and all this other stuff, will lose seconds. And they make a little machine, like you set it down in it and you put the thing in and you hit a button and it goes beep, beep, beep. And then you get a little graph that shows you like how well it's keeping time. And it's probably not shocking to anybody, but I did not buy one of those. Harbor Freight did not have one of those devices, unfortunately. I had a foolproof method of testing this watch. My wife and I went to dinner and I wore it. And I thought, people are going to be snapping pictures of me. They're going to be asking me questions. Everybody is going to have questions about this watch. Nobody cared. Nobody noticed it. And I didn't talk to anybody. And we sat pretty far away from most people. So nobody saw it. Nobody cared. But oh well. The way that I tested the timekeeping on it is I synced it to my wife's Apple Watch, down to the second. And so throughout dinner, every so often I would look at my wrist and I would say, what time does your watch say? All right, it's still good. And so that went on for several hours. My wife had a fantastic time, I assure you that. And, you know, from what I could tell, it did pretty well. It did all right. So I just slapped the back on it, and now I've got this cool timepiece that I got on eBay for pretty cheap, and it's working. Again, I don't wear it a lot. You know, I wear it if we go out. My wife bought me a nicer watch anyway. And again, typically I'll just wear an Apple Watch. But look at it. I mean, it's so cool. A piece from the 60s, still operating, ended up in my tiny little grubby hands and was almost mutilated. It almost lost its life, but look, it's keeping time. And that, my friends, is the story of how I fell down a rabbit hole of watch repair and repaired a vintage watch. That is the reason I bought this. I'm glad I could talk about it and justify my $40 that I spent. Hopefully you learned something. You probably didn't, but that's okay.